Before we get started on today's video, I've got a favour to ask. We're only 80 subscribers away for 45k, so if you haven't subscribed already, please click the red subscribe button below. If we pass the 45k mark before Friday, I'll be back with you to do a live stream for the fixtures coming out at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. So there's definitely going to be more than 80 of you watching that aren't subscribed. So click that red subscribe button below and we'll get into today's video. Yes, folks, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel. Coming up today, we're going to look at all the latest transfer rumours in and out of Celtic. And then as part of the second stage of this series, we're looking at the squad. We're going to take a closer look at the midfield, and that's a good link to the transfer rumours because this morning Celtic have been linked with a move for West Ham's Andy Irving. He is a midfield player. He's 25 years of age. He's a Scottish internationalist now. He started his career at Hearts, and he's had a bit of a strange sort of journey so far. As I say, 25 years of age. I think he went to Germany after leaving Hearts in the third tier of German football, and then he made the move to Austria before getting that big move to West Ham. He hasn't featured so much for West Ham. I actually watched a video of a West Ham fan this morning talking about their sort of situation with transfers and trying to move players out, and he was talking about Irving and saying they'd probably have liked to seen a bit more of him because he's looked pretty decent when he's played. He's not someone I remember too much of at Hearts. I think they were in the Championship for much of the time that he was there. Sort of 2019, I think, when he made the breakthrough to the Hearts first team. Don't remember too much of him, but as I say, he's left-sided central midfield player, kind of versatile. Looks like he can play in numerous positions across midfield. Again, we find ourselves in this stage of the season where there is constant links to different players, and we come here and talk about the rumours. I know that 95% of these never come to fruition, so it's difficult to really talk about these things in any great depth before they get to an advanced stage and it looks like someone is really going to join the club. But when we come back to looking at the current Celtic midfield in a minute, we can maybe talk about what we feel we're lacking there, if there's any players in that area of the pitch we think might move on this summer, and if they do, what do we need to then replace them. I think someone like Andy Irving may not be the most exciting name linked with the club. It's probably not a name that the fans are really excited about coming in. I think he's made a decent impression at West Ham despite the fact he's not managed to get so much game time. But again, 25 years of age, Scottish internationalist. Do you think that he would add anything to the current Celtic midfield? It's going to be interesting to see how this one develops. Another name linked today is Evan Ferguson. He was a name that was linked with us back in January, the Brighton striker, again, Irish internationalist. Impressed for Brighton when he first got into their team, scored some really good goals, looks a big physical presence. He's only 20 years of age. The news this morning seemed to suggest that Ferguson is one that Celtic could target before the end of the transfer window, but only if no other club is willing to take a gamble on him. Now, that seems like a huge red flag to me, because if Celtic are going to wait to bring in a striker towards the end of the window, we've got this Champions League qualifier to navigate, of course, which will come up before the end of that transfer window. We just do not want to leave ourselves in the situation where we're waiting and waiting and waiting for a target like Ferguson, and that means that you're going to be dragging it out until the last week or the last few days of the transfer window. And I know it's Celtic, that's how it works. We find ourselves in that position every single window. I'm not sure Ferguson. I think he's a good player. It's obviously not quite from that brilliant start he made at Brighton when he first broke into their first team. He hasn't quite managed to sustain that. I think he went on loan last season as well, so it's clear that his future's uncertain. I think he's one maybe in a similar vein to Adam Ida, where he could come to Celtic and it'd probably be a loan deal. By all accounts, I'm not sure if Brighton are going to be willing to let him go on a permanent transfer. I think it's if no club takes a gamble on a permanent transfer, then he'll be available for loan later in the window, which again might be a red flag for many people. But Ida came in on loan, impressed, and scored a lot of important goals for us. You could debate whether the fact that successful loan spell for Ida closed us into a position where we spent a wee bit too much on him in terms of a permanent transfer. But Ferguson's of a similar mould. I think maybe too similar, given the attributes and the versatility we would like up front, because Evan Ferguson is quite a big striker, a big physical presence, maybe technically more sound than Ida. Scored a lot of good goals, as I say, for Brighton, but I'm not sure he is of the stature that we would like, because I think it's better to have someone who is, if not polar opposite, then very distinct from the style of Ida, just to let us have that versatility in terms of how Brendan Rodgers sets up the team, given what the game will demand. So Ferguson and Irving are the two names linked from the Premier League to Celtic today. West Ham are obviously prepared to sell Irving on a permanent basis. They're not doing so much in transfers in terms of inbound. I think it looks like they have to move some players on. Whether it be about the PSR regulations down south, they're having to move ship some players out before they can do any business in. Now, where the fee would be for Andy Irving, I'm not sure. The West Ham guy that I watched earlier seemed to think it would only be in the region of £3 to £5 million. So we'll see how that one develops, and we'll come back to looking at the entire picture in midfield for Celtic in a moment. But that's it for the rumours today in terms of inward. If we move on to outward news, Maik Nawrocki looks like he could be going out on loan back to Poland to Pogoń Szczecin. I hope I've pronounced that properly, but it looks like the centre half is going to get a chance to go and play football. Some debate on social media this morning about will he be in a position, if he comes back stronger from that loan move, to make an impact in the Celtic first team. I don't see that for 1 minute. Maik Nawrocki has been here and been available, but for injury for 2 full seasons now. He hasn't managed to impress Brendan Rodgers enough to get a run of games in the team. And while we've been successful through that period, we've won 2 doubles last season, and then the season just gone there has been question marks at centre half from time to time, and Nawrocki still hasn't managed to nail down anything like a consistent place in the team. And again, I think you come back to that 23-24 summer recruitment that included Nawrocki, included Lager Bielka, included Palma, Tilio, Kwon, Yang. Almost all of those players have had to go on loan. Nawrocki possibly about to go on loan, and Yang is probably the only one who hasn't had to go out to get game time, because I think it was clear pretty early in their Celtic careers that they weren't in the position to impact the first team in any way, shape or form. Now, do you expect Kwon, Tilio, Lager Bielka, Palma to come back and set the first team alight, or even get back in first team contention? I would go out on a limb and say that none of those guys are going to make a long-term impact to the first team. I know there's talk about Tilio coming back from his loan in Australia and maybe being able to take some part in pre-season and let Brendan Rodgers assess where he's at. But again, I just don't think any of these players are at the level we need to go and improve the first team. That's not to say that they haven't gotten better or developed in any way from being on loan and playing a bit more. But I think I'd be really surprised to see any of those guys come back and be in a position to impact the first team. And that goes for Nawrocki as well. I think it's good for him to go and get football, because he hasn't been playing at all for Celtic. For Celtic's point of view, I think ideally we would move him on permanently. I think he's made less than 20 appearances for £4.5 million in 2 seasons. As I talked about the other day, there's so much waste in terms of the money we've spent at centre half and the return that we've got from that in the last 2 or 3 years. So it makes sense to move him on. I think ideally it'd be permanent, but it looks like it's going to be on loan. But I would be extremely surprised if he's ever in a position to come back and go into the Celtic first team. Now, we know nobody's got a crystal ball. We may well have a different manager in a season or two's time after the end of next season, and that can change the complexion for every player, and then maybe he could move up the pecking order. But as I say, I just don't see it. He's had the opportunity over 2 years to impress and training every day, and also try and nail down a run the team, and it just has not materialised. So that's it for transfer rumours. I don't think there's anything I've missed. Another thing I'm going to do today is come back to some questions that you guys have sent in on YouTube and on Instagram that I didn't have a chance to get through the other day. But it's time to turn our attention to the Celtic midfield. This is an area of the pitch where we do have decent depth. We've got a number of good players, a number of key players. We obviously spent a bit of money in that area of the pitch last season. If we talk about central midfield, first of all, we obviously have the captain Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate, Arnie Engels, Paulo Bernardo, and Luke McCowan. There's a couple of young players trying to break through in that position as well. We've seen the likes of Turley last pre-season. We saw Jude Bonner make his debut throughout the course of last season as well. And towards the end of the campaign, we saw young Sean McCardle have a couple of appearances as well. So those guys are on the fringes, really trying to get in the manager's thoughts for making squads and making the bench. So we're not going to really consider those guys in this discussion about midfield. We're all focusing on the first team players. And first up, Rio Hatate. I think he is part of a group of players who have been at Celtic, like Callum Carter-Vickers, who I covered the other day for 4 years now. And it's a key time in his career. He's 27 years of age, the same as Carter-Vickers, the same as Dyson Maeda. And it's about whether he wants to be here again. Does he want to move on? Does he want a fresh challenge? And is that going to hinder his desire and his motivation to go again for Celtic? As such, it is silly season, as I say. I've already heard a rumour that he said goodbye to the staff at his favourite restaurant in Glasgow. Those are the sorts of things that you hear around this time of year. It was a bad injury for him that caused him to miss the final league game of the season and the cup final, and there's no doubt we missed him in the cup final. I think we are a better player when Hatate's in form and he's playing. The inconsistency has been a thread throughout his Celtic career. He is one that I think a lot of people feel like it may well be time for him to naturally move on, and maybe he's come to the end of his cycle. I think there's been a couple of occurrences through his Celtic career where he's maybe made some comments to Japanese media about wanting to move on and play at a higher level and move to the Premier League or to a bigger league abroad. And like I say, at 27 years of age, this may well be the time to do that. His contract runs until May 2028, so we've got 3 years left on that. I think it's an ideal time. If you get to next summer, you've only got 2 years left, then the club ends up in a sticky situation. Maybe what I'm saying here sounds like Hatate's already out the door. I don't think that, but I think of any of the midfield group, he probably is the one that's most likely to move on this summer. And like I say, if you look at his age, his profile, how long he's been at the club, and the nature of Celtic is that we do move players on, and we have to do that as part of the player trading model. So Hatate's probably the one top of the list in midfield that you think would move on. I know that Engels only having arrived last summer for 11 million quid. There was a link, I think there was a loose transfer link to him maybe a month or so ago towards the end of the season. I just don't see that happening after, 12 months, less than 12 months after arriving. For 11 million quid, he is still 21 years of age. He signed a contract till June 2028 as well. So we'll see how that develops in terms of outward links this summer in midfield. But I think Bernardo and McCowan are in the position as squad players. Bernardo missed a lot of the campaign with injury, but just didn't quite do enough in the time that he's had to prove that he should be a first team pick in midfield. That first choice three has been McGregor, Hatate and Engels over the course of the season. Those guys have played the most games. I think Hatate played the most games out of anyone. He'd played part in every single competitive Celtic match up until he got injured at Aberdeen and then missed those last 2 games. So those 3 are the first choice midfield right now, but there is a question about the qualities we have in midfield. Do we have enough? I know that in some of the big games against Rangers and maybe in some European games, a lot of supporters would like more of a physical, aggressive presence in midfield, and I know that's not the style that we play in. We're a technical team. We like to keep possession. We like to pass the ball, build it through the pitch, but I think when you come up against better teams and the game asks different things of you, you do want to have more aggression and possibly more physicality in midfield. Now, Callum McGregor has had that at times. I think if you think back to Postecoglou's time, when we were trying to win the title back and there was that momentum and we chased Rangers down and then got ahead of them, when McGregor came back from injury, he looked like a man possessed and he was getting after players, and I think he can do that. But again, you need to think about Callum McGregor now as a 31-year-old midfield player who plays in that deeper position. He's not going to be the forerunner in terms of pressing teams and getting after them. And I think there's always been this demand for a sort of Wanyama type player since the day Wanyama left, I suppose. And I know it's not easy to get a midfield player who is really comfortable on the ball and can play in the manner that Brendan Rodgers wants him to, and who's also a strong physical specimen. We're unlikely to sign Rodri this summer, so I know it's not easy to find that ideal player, but I agree that I think we do need maybe one more body in midfield, maybe somebody who can offer us something a bit different. I think if you look at McCowan and Bernardo, they're slightly different. I think McCowan's really good technically, really tidy, can score you a goal. I think he's contributed well this season. I think Bernardo is a powerful runner, but again, maybe his quality has been wanting at times. And again, he struggled with fitness there last season. I don't think any of those guys have those qualities that I'm talking about that we feel are maybe missing. You can let me know in the comments below if you think we're missing something in midfield, and if so, what is it? Do you think we have to move anyone out this season from midfield? It's really difficult to look at that list of central midfielders and think about who would move on. I don't think there's anybody there like centre half where you're thinking Nawrocki can go, Lagerbielke can go, Welsh coming back from loan can probably move on. There's maybe question marks for some people with Scales. Would you let him go or keep him as a squad player? It's not like that in midfield. I don't think you look at that midfield and say, do you know what, we should probably move McCowan on. We should probably move Bernardo on. I don't think it's quite like that. I think Bernardo and McCowan are really good squad players and they can contribute throughout a season. It's just about finding a starter. And again, if you think McGregor, Hatate, Engels are the first choice three, then it's difficult to make a case for a starter. It was interesting after the video the other day, a lot of you commented saying that Benjamin Nygren, if he comes in, is going to play in a central role, maybe in a sort of 10 position. I'm not sure about that. I know that he is versatile and he can play in a number of different positions, and he has done for Nordsjælland and over his career, but I'm not sure where he's going to fit in a central position for Celtic. He does, if anything, strikes me as more of a 10 than an 8, and we do play with 2 8s, I think, in this setup currently under Brendan Rodgers, so you could make a case as he maybe like a Matt O'Reilly or a Tom Rogic, but I'm not sure he would play centrally. And if these links are to be believed with other midfield players, the likes of Andy Irving, then how many central midfield players are we looking at this summer, given that we've currently got 5 first team central midfield players? You don't want to end up in the same situation as centre half, where you've maybe got 2 or 3 extra players than you really need, and you're going to end up with players on the fringes who can't take part. So let us know if you think anyone will or should move on from midfield this summer, and let us know who you think, how many you think we should bring in. I think it might be one out and one in, and like I say, if I look at this list of names, the most natural departure may well be Rio Hatate, and that would be big shoes for us to fill. I know he's inconsistent at times, but I think the quality he's got on the ball is really, really key for us. But you have to balance that against replacing the quality on the ball and the other good attributes that Hatate can bring to the team, and maybe adding those other elements to the team in terms of the physicality and the aggression that you sometimes need in midfield in these bigger games in Europe or against Rangers, where we did struggle at times in midfield this season. So I think there's some work to do there. I think Hatate would be a big loss for us. And again, like centre half, where we've made some recruitment mistakes in the past, it would be a huge, huge challenge for the recruitment at the club to go and replace Rio Hatate. And like I say, get it right in terms of the right technical quality, but also trying to add something that we don't currently have in midfield. That's a challenge for him. That's probably a challenge for Brendan Rodgers. The first question that I asked Brendan Rodgers on his return to the club at the press conference was, how do you assess the squad compared to the squad you had the first time round, and what would you like to add? And he said we would like to add power. I'm not sure we have really added much power to the team that he inherited. Maybe a new addition in midfield can do that this summer. Right, let's turn our attention then to some of your questions. A couple of you have left questions on YouTube, and I got a load of questions in on Instagram before Monday's video as well, so I didn't get a chance to get into the Monday's video. I'm going to run through some of them now. If you don't follow us on Instagram, you can at Celtic Fans TV. First up, Mr. Lofi, who is number one keeper this season. I covered that on Monday. I think it is Kasper Schmeichel, absolutely, undoubtedly. I think obviously there was maybe a big knee-jerk reaction to the mistake that Kasper made in the cup final. I don't think over the course of the season you can say that he really made many errors and that he has to be replaced in any way. I did say I would like to see more minutes from Sinisalo, but at risk of repeating myself, and I don't want to do that, Kasper's definitely the number one choice heading into next season. Another question for Mr. Lofi is, would you keep Greg Taylor? Again, covered this a wee bit on Monday. I probably would keep him as a backup, and as a backup seems maybe a bit derogatory given the career that Greg Taylor's had at Celtic, but I would have him to share minutes with Kieran Tierney, but it doesn't look like it's going to materialise. Looks like he's going to join PAOK or Copenhagen. His contract is about to come to an end and he's available on a free transfer. It doesn't look like he's going to stay at Celtic at all. Matthew Blaney, do you think Rodgers is developing and improving enough talent in the current squad? Right now, without having time to actually dig in and think deeply about this, that Brendan Rodgers' big quality as a manager has been developing the talent that he's inherited, and I think arguably you could make the case that he has done that this time round as well. I think there was a big improvement in Matt O'Reilly, of course, through the season that he had with Brendan Rodgers. He scored a lot of goals. He looked like a more natural goal-scoring midfield player who would arrive late in the box and get the timing right, and he added a lot of goals to his game and really, I would say, went to another level. So I think, and I mean that's an isolated example, I think the big challenge for Brendan Rodgers, as I said on Monday, is some of the signings since he's been at the club, and I'm hesitant to say that they're his signings, as if he was the only person that went and scouted them, he was the only person that made the decision to sign them. I think some of the signings and the players that have been brought in since he arrived back at the club are the ones who you want more from, you want more development from, you want more improvement from. Obviously, you can look at someone like Kyogo and say that he didn't not improve or develop Kyogo because he was at a different stage of his career to Matt O'Reilly, but couldn't get the best out of him. Maybe it wasn't the qualities that you associate with a Brendan Rodgers striker. If you look through the team, Kuhn, you could say, improved after the sticky 4 or 5 months he had after arriving at the club in January. He really improved at the start of last season. I think if you look at Brendan Rodgers' time at the club, it was awkward that first campaign. We sort of struggled through it and we got over the line late on. I think from minute one last season, even in pre-season, you could see the work that he'd done with the team in terms of how good they were on counter-attacks and transitions. You could see that in pre-season, how good the pressing was. The pressing had went up to another level, and I think that we started the season like a house on fire, and yes, it did tail off. But I think if you look collectively at the team, there was big improvements last season. Yes, there's question marks over why we maybe tailed off. Was it the size of the lead? Was it the lack of jeopardy? I think after the Champions League, which was a big psychological dump for us coming out of the competition after pushing Bayern Munich so close. But I think that game in Munich was evidence that the team are improving and that Brendan Rodgers has collectively improved the squad in terms of our approach to some of these games. I think you can look at isolated examples in any team and question whether the manager's getting huge improvements and huge developments out of them. Again, I think it's different on individual basis. You look at Greg Taylor, someone who really thrived when Ange Postecoglou came to the club just because of the style that Ange wanted to play in. So there's lots of different instances like that. You could look at Kyogo, as I say, with Rodgers and say that it just didn't quite work. Wasn't the right mix for between player and manager. I think Dyson Maeda is someone that's improved under Brendan Rodgers, certainly in terms of his goal scoring ability. I think he's a lot calmer in front of goal now. Again, you can't lay that wholly at Brendan Rodgers' door. He is maturing as a player naturally. He's 27 years of age now, but yes, I think Brendan Rodgers is doing enough in terms of developing players. The big question mark is, can a combination of him and the club improve the recruitment and make sure the players that are coming in while he's here are better, and they're in a better position to make a big impact to the first 11. Aidan Coffey, would you rather sign a top winger or top striker given Jota's injury as well as Maeda's form playing as a striker? We need to sign a striker. I cannot emphasise it enough how much we need to sign a striker this summer. There is no chance that we can go forward with Dyson, Maeda and Adamida as the only two striking options. I know we're talking about Callum Osmond arriving at the club. You can't consider him in a position to be the first choice striker, which is what I think we have to sign. We don't need another number. We don't need another body in the door. We need a top striker. It's a very specialised position. I've said in the past throughout the history of doing this channel that you're only as good as your centre forward. In our previous first choice centre forward was a big game player. He scored big goals in big games, and yes, it did tail off after Brendan Rodgers came back, as I've just covered as part of the last question. But there's no danger that we can go through this summer window without signing a striker. I think it's more important than a winger. Most of the links so far in this window have been with wingers. So we're definitely looking at getting that as well. So I suppose this is a hypothetical that if you had to choose, I would probably still choose a striker. I think we really need to improve in that area of the pitch, both domestically and for the big games in Europe, for getting through these qualifiers, or this qualifying tie particularly. Right, last two questions before I leave you. From Nicholas on YouTube. I need to shout out Nicholas, by the way. Comments on every single video. Thank you for the support as always. He's asked a few questions, one of which is, how do you think that Kieran Tierney will change Brendan Rodgers' style? I don't think so. I think Kieran's probably a better fit for the natural fullback role, if you like, than Greg Taylor. Greg Taylor's really suited at being inverted and coming inside the pitch and taking part in the midfield build-up. I think Kieran's less suited at that. I think he's much stronger in terms of his one-on-one defending and his aggression and his physicality than Taylor, but I also think in terms of his running ability to get up and down as a natural wide fullback or wing back, if you like, fullback in this system you would call it. I don't think there'll be too much change. I think, as you've said, Tierney is better overlapping, and will it cause congestion with Maeda out wide? I don't think so. I think they can dovetail, and there can be space made for Kieran to overlap, but I think he will play in a similar vein to the way he did in his first spell round at Celtic. Right, last question. Phil Maguire, do you think we will splash the cash for a striker and a midfield enforcer, or will Maeda play as number one striker and we get two first-team wingers in with the likely departure of Kuhn? Covered this with one of the Instagram questions. There is no danger we cannot sign a striker this summer. I will say it till I'm blue in the face. Will we get a midfield enforcer? That's another matter. I think if Hatate goes, we will need a new body in there. It should be one of a high calibre, and hopefully it will be one who brings a bit more power and a bit more physicality to the midfield, because I think that's the thing that is lacking in that area of the pitch. But I don't even think Dyson will play as the number one striker. I think we have to recruit a number one striker this season. The thing with Dyson is he has got much better in terms of his finishing and his composure in front of goal, but I think he's still better on the left-hand side. We've debated this over the course of last season. I know that Callum and some other boys on the channel really preferred them through there. But I think what we've seen last season with Dyson Maeda was an absolutely incredible campaign where he scored a lot of goals. I think he outperformed, again, I know a lot of he's can he cope with this sort of topic, but he really outperformed his XG last season. That may well be unsustainable again this season. He swept the floor with the Player of the Year awards. Is he going to be able to maintain quite that high level again this season? It's unlikely. There may well be some form of drop-off. We've seen it over the course of time with loads of players where they have an absolutely golden season. It's really difficult to have one of those seasons year after year after year. That's when you're looking at the man behind me who was able to do that. So it's difficult for Dyson to go and match or better his output from last season, and I think he will move back out wide, and we have to sign a top striker. We have to sign a number one striker, because Adam Ida has had his opportunity with Kyogo's departure to really prove to us that he's that guy, that he's got everything that we need in a striker, a number one striker moving forward. I don't think he's done enough to prove that. So that's it for today. Like the video. Remember, if we get over 45,000 subscribers by today or tomorrow, I'll be back with you on Friday morning, 9 a.m. live stream for next season's fixtures, which will be released by the SPFL then. Thank you for watching today, and I'll hopefully see you on Friday. Cheers.